Hi everyone, I'm Shaham. In this video, I will show you the initial one-time setup to get a project on your machine to do FHIR implementation guide development. So we'll walk through setting up your tools. The first useful tool to have is a text editor or an integrated development environment, which would be even better. I will show VS Code, which is what I use. It's a Visual Studio Code. It's a free tool you could download and install on many operating systems. And I will show the JSON schema support within VS Code. Then I'll walk through the directory layout that you need, the minimum directory layout and minimum files and content to get the tooling working. And then we'll run the FHIR publisher to generate the minimal empty website. Once that's all working, then we could go on and develop stuff iteratively with this initial setup. So what you see in this video will be committed and pushed to GitHub. So I have a repository under my name, FHIR-YouTube. Under this repository, you'll find everything I do on this channel. For this video, if you go to the directory, so if you go to FHIR YouTube, go to the videos folder, and then go to the examples folder, and then the FHIR IG demo folder. And right now it's empty other than a README, which I'll walk through here in a minute. But the other stuff will be put up here too, in case you want to copy it and start from there. Okay, so let's move on to the actual README file locally. It's a little bit different than what you see at GitHub. Okay. And let me update the name. Okay. My videos here in the channel are not edited. They're live. At most, what I'll do is I'll pause if I have a problem, if I need to think a little bit. So at times they're kind of a little bit not very smooth. So I'll fix things as I go along, and you'll see my mistakes or any problems as I see them, and we'll figure it out together. Okay, so this is the README that you'll see on GitHub once it's up there. And the initial setup section, which is what you see right here, the initial setup section is what we're doing in this video. So we'll walk through all this together. Okay, so create the initial directories for the project. This is just the topmost directory, whatever you want it to be. And in this case, it's the FHIR-IG-demo directory. What you're seeing here is VS Code. Let me briefly kind of mention this. This is a VS Code, and you open a directory in VS Code, which is considered your workspace, and you'll see the content of that directory here, and you just click on what you want to look at, and it will open it, and you look at it. And I'll show the JSON schema support in a second. So the root directory for the overall project is FHIR.IG.demo. And within that, we'll have to create a subdirectory which contains the IG specific stuff. Outside that directory, you could add other things as needed. The IG root directory can be anything you want to name it. I'm just naming it IG root, and you see it here, IG root. It's inside FHIR IG demo directory. Okay. There is a gitignore file that's just meant to ignore jar files, and you used to have a directory called attic. Don't need that anymore. And then there's the README in here. Okay. So that's just to get started. Okay, so then we're going to download the publisher tool, and I have a URL here to go to and download it from. So if you copy that URL, and let me switch back to here. So if you go to that URL, you will get to the GitHub repository for the publisher, which is under the HL7 organization. So HL7/FHIR IG publisher. And under the releases section right here, they have frequent releases. So right now they have 1.3.8, and I believe the one I'm showing is 35, not 38. You click on the publisher.jar file and you save it wherever you want. I'm going to save it in the IG root folder, and I'll show that to you in a second. When you download this file, it's probably a good idea to change the name and put the version number as a suffix to the name, just so you know which one you have. And I'm showing how to do this from scratch. They have a slightly automated tooling to help you with this, but I'm not showing that in this video. I want to do everything from scratch so you can see the simpler from scratch steps. Okay, so I said download the IG publisher and put in the IG root. So this is the folder. I'm going to open it, and I have the IG publisher 1.1.35. I have it put in here. The IG publisher is a jar file, which means it needs Java. So I have another video after this that shows how to make sure you have Java installed on your machine. And the publisher also needs a couple of other tools. Well, it needs one other tool called Jekyll, which is a static site generator. And that tool is written in Ruby, so you need to have Ruby installed. And they have a video about getting both of those installed on your Windows machine. It's easier on other operating systems, and there are lots of instructions on the web. See that video to know more. Okay, so we grabbed the publisher, okay? And like I said, just tag it with a number that you have in case you need to update or go back. Okay. So the publisher, when you run it, when you run the tool, you would run it Java space-jar, the publisher file name, whatever you end up naming it. And then there's one parameter you need to pass it. It's the IG parameter. And that is a configuration file, a very simple configuration file. It's ig.ini, which means it's the ini Windows format. So I have that file right here. It's within the IG root. I put the publisher in the IG root. The ig.ini, you do want it in the IG root. And I'll get to this input folder in a second, but these have to be kind of siblings. The IG and the input folder have to be siblings, wherever you want to put them. The ig.ini file has really two pieces of information to the publisher jar. It tells it what template to use, which is for the static website generation, and you want to use this value for it. There are other templates, but this is the one that the community is supposed to use. And the other piece is points to another file, which I happen to name ig.json. You could name it whatever you want, but it's a JSON file that contains an instance of an implementation guide resource, and I'll get to that in a second. And this file is inside the input folder. Okay, so there's an input folder right here, and if you open it, you'll see it has the ig.json file. Okay, so there's igini that is given to the publisher, and that file points at another file that I just happen to name ig.json. This could be, these files could be named differently. It's the content that matters, really. Okay, so let me close this back up and go back to the README. Okay, so we created the ig.ini file. And like I said, the name and directory can be changed, but wherever you put that ini file, everything is relative to that file. So this input folder has to be next to the ini file. Okay. So to create the ig.json, which I have already created, but let me see, did I erase it? Let's empty this. I'll show you a couple things. Okay. So this is the ig.json file. It will have a single JSON object. The type of this object is the FHIR implementation guide resource, and let me show you what that means. So if we go to the FHIR specification, if you go to the home page under conformance resources, you'll see there's an entry implementation guide right here. Or if you happen to click on that, you'll see it also right here, implementation guide right here. So you click on that, you'll get to the page that describes the implementation guide resource. And in here, you'll have the structure of this resource. So our JSON object will have this structure. And there's a minimum set of fields that is required. You don't have to fill in everything. So I'm going to show you what is needed just to get the tooling working without any errors, even though there's no real content in it yet. We will add content in other follow-up videos. Okay. So this is the, let me go back to, okay, so this is VS Code, which is Visual Studio Code. It's my IDE that I'm using for this channel. I think most of the time it will be this. To enable JSON schema support, okay, if you're familiar with JSON, you sort of know what I'm talking about. There are a couple of ways of having JSON support. One of them is to put the schema reference within the JSON object, but that doesn't work with the FHIR JSON objects. You have to do the configuration outside the file, which means you'll have to do it within VS Code. The way it works in VS Code, if you click on File and you go to Preferences, go to Settings, and start typing JSON schema, you will have the JSON entry. Click on that. You have a choice to where to put this configuration. Do you want it in your workspace, which means the directory that you opened in VS Code, or do you want it user-wide on your computer? I have it set up for the workspace. When you select this, you edit the settings.json file. This settings.json file is in the workspace, and I'll show it in a second. It's a JSON file, and this is the syntax for how to specify which files should follow which schema. So what I have here is I'm saying the /video/example /FHIR IG demo IG root any JSON file should follow this JSON schema file right here. And if we copy that and we'll go to a web browser and just put it in a web browser, you'll see the schema right here. So this is the JSON schema for all of FHIR for version 4. That's what you see here, R4. And we'll talk in some other video about how to pin your schema to a specific version. Excuse me. So in JSON schema, there's an idea of a discriminator field. And in this case, the resource type field is the one that specifies what other fields can exist in JSON object. So usually you want to pick the value for the resource type first, so that the tool will then know what other fields to suggest and complete for you. Okay. And in our case, the resource type is, like I said, is going to be implementation guide. So we'll specify that. Okay. So let me go back to VS Code. This is the JSON settings file. And let me briefly show you where that is. So let me switch to here. So, like I said, I showed the GitHub repository for this YouTube channel. It is the FHIR-YouTube folder, and that's the one I have open in VS Code. So when I say something, save some setting in the workspace, it will save it in this .vs code folder. This is where all the settings are saved, and this is the settings.json file. So it's saved at the root directory that is open in VS Code. And you could see what I have open in VS Code is FHIR YouTube right up here. Okay, so let's see, where were we? Okay, so we got our JSON schema configured in VS Code for the JSON files that we want that schema supports to be effective on. Okay, so this is the ig.json. And again, like I said, you want to resource type. So you just start typing, you'll get the autocomplete based on the schema. We're going to pick resource type. And then I'm hitting Control Shift to get this autocomplete. So here you have the various FHIR resources that you could work with. Okay, you want to pick this first, so then the tool knows what to support after that. We're doing implementation guides, so just start typing and then pick and hit enter. And now you specified this JSON object is of type implementation guide, and the schema will help you with the rest. So control space, and you'll get all the fields here as suggestions, and they match the fields that we were looking at right here for the implementation guide. These fields that you saw here, they match that. Okay. So now to save some time and prevent errors, I'm going to copy the content here and just paste it and walk through it. Okay. So again, resource type implementation guide. ID, the identifier of the JSON object. We'll talk about that more later, but basically every type of resource, when you create an instance of it, it's supposed to have a unique ID. The identifiers are per resource type. They have to be unique within all the resource types. It has to be unique within the resource type that the ID is for. Okay, and then there's a version of this resource. We're just starting from scratch, so I gave it whatever version you can, if you want, 001, 000, whatever you like. There's no real restrictions. Semantic versioning is recommended for this value. I'm going to be mentioning lots of things that might not sound familiar. There's really no time to explain everything. Other videos will explain more details. I just want to show the various issues involved and give enough pointers and just to see them working, and then I'll explain them later. Hopefully you're familiar with some or most of them. The URL, some FHIR resources have a URL, and it's a unique identifier for that resource in a URL format, which also usually means you could retrieve that resource from that URL, which also assumes there's a FHIR server at that URL. We'll get into that more later. But the pattern usually is you pick whatever URL prefix you have, okay? And you could fake it for now, but eventually you'll have to have a server at this URL, for example, right here, this prefix, okay? And I don't have one. I just use the GitHub path just to make this unique. And then you put slash, and you put the resource type, and then you put a slash, and you put the ID, the resource ID. So they supposed to match. So the resource ID and the type right at the end, separated by slashes. If you don't do this, the tooling will give you a warning that your URL is not matching the rest of your resource information. The name field is meant to be a computer-friendly name, tool-friendly name, which usually means no spaces, no weird characters. You could choose whatever format you want. I'm doing camel case here. The title is human-friendly, a title, and you could have spaces and formatting as you like. And in VS Code with schema enabled, schema support for the JSON file enabled, you could hover over a key and you will get the documentation sort of for it. It's coming from the FHIR specification. It's at least giving enough information to know what that field is. Package ID, just put a package ID. This when you're really doing FHIR development, this ends up becoming an NPM package ID for distribution. So you'll have to pick an ID properly at that point. But for now, you just do that. Status, pick draft, and let me bring this browser over. Is it? Yes. Bring it over here. You could. Well, you know what? Let me switch. It's easier. Okay, so the status field, for example, it's right here. Okay, it's required. It's 1-to-1, so you have to pick a status. And right here, it's giving you, these are your options for status. You could pick one of these four. It's not really up to you to fill in whatever you want. And like I said, with the schema support enabled, if you enter status and then control space, it will give you the proper values that you could pick here. And then you just pick what you want. FHIR version, it's an array. 4.0.1 is the current FHIR version. And then we get to the definition section. So let's kind of step back a little bit. The IG.json file is sort of like your master configuration file for what is in your IG, how it should be built, what pages should be created, what resources are included, and so forth. If you're familiar with Java, it's sort of similar to the POM file. If you use Maven for build, it's sort of similar to that. If you use other tools, there's like package file or whatever. It is the configuration for the whole package that you are developing. So it has information about elements for the whole package and what's included in the package. Okay, so the definition section is where it starts to specify what's included in the package. Okay, there are three top groups, and I'm going to switch back to the documentation, and you can see it right here. There's a definition field, and it has resources. It has page. A page can have many pages under it, so there's one page entry, 0 to 1. And within a page, there are multiple 0 to many. So you could have pages inside pages inside pages. I'll explain what that means. And then you have parameter, which is a code and a value, a key and a value. You could have as many parameters as you want. Okay. And then there's also like template and grouping, but let's not worry about that for now. That's more kind of more advanced stuff. So for definition, it specifies what resources are included in IG, and right now, I'm sorry, I'm not showing the right screen. Okay, so for resources, I have an empty array, which I'm saying there are no resources included right now in this implementation guide. And even though the specification says resources, you need at least one to many, the tooling still is forgiving enough. It will let you build the static site for an IG, even if you have no resources. So I'm just leaving that empty. For pages, this is the web pages that you want to create, in addition to any automatically created web pages from the resources. So if you have a resource, the tooling automatically creates one or more web pages for that resource, but you will likely want to have additional pages in your static website that has additional documentation, that organizes content in additional ways beyond the resource-oriented pages. So that's where you specify that here. The way you do that is you start with a top-level page, because you could only have one top page, and then you nest additional pages inside the top-level page, and then each page itself can have further nesting of pages. So it's like a tree of pages. The top one, at least in this template, has to be the table of content page. So it's not the index.html page, it's the toc.html page. This page, the tooling will create it automatically for you, and will have links to everything in the IG, but it will only create it if you actually say you want that page, and it has to be the top level page. So I went ahead and created it. You really don't need this entry. You could remove this completely, and you will not have the table of content, but it's worth having that at least. So you put the page name, and again, this is hard-coded by the template. And you could name the page whatever you want, and HTML means it's processed and generated through HTML. It's not conversion from Markdown and whatever. And I have no subpages. Okay, so that's the only page that is that I'm asking the tooling to recognize. And this one, the tooling will create on its own if it does not find an existing HTML file already. So this is sort of a default one. And after that, there is this idea of a parameter. The implementation guide resource is gradually specifying configuration parameters for tooling. So these parameters apply to sort of any tool that recognize them. It's a way of having common parameters across different tools instead of each tool having its own configuration file. More and more of the configuration information is being migrated into this file under parameters. So think of this as command line options. It's the option and the value, okay? And these two seem to be really required by the tool and the template. You'll get an error if you don't put these. It will literally tell you in the error, this is missing, and then you'll go to the documentation, find out what you might need to put in there and add it. And we'll get into more details about this later. But for now, this is the minimum set of information that is needed to describe your implementation guide. And again, this was the IG.json, okay? Okay, so that is here. We created the IG JSON. We put it in the IG root right next to the, in the input folder, okay? So we had, if you remember, there's IG.ini, which is in the IG root folder. Inside the IG root folder, we have the input folder, and inside the input folder, we have the IG.json file, okay? Okay, so we got that set up. There are a couple of additional directories that are needed by default. I gave that Maven analogy. Maven, for example, by default looks for your Java main source code folder or testing folder. Same thing here. The publisher by default looks for a resources folder where the resources are placed. And when you mention a resource in this empty array here, it will start looking through these resource folders. And the one default folder is called resources. You need to create that folder, even if you're not really mentioning any resources here. The tool, as it is right now, will fail if you don't have this folder. So under input folder, right next to the IG.json folder, you'll need to have a resources folder and an includes folder. Includes are fragments that will be included in pages, and there is one file in there that I'll show you in a second. Okay, so that's what we're describing here. Create the minimum folders, input resources, and input includes. Okay. Now within the includes, there is one file called menu.xml where you specify the structure of your menu. So if I go back to the HL7 website, this red bar up here, this is the menu bar. Whatever you put in that menu file will specify the menu that you see up here. And there are drop-down options in there too. So there's a little bit of a specific HTML to add in there to do it the right way. So I have copied and simplified a menu.xml file in the includes folder. And what you see in it is you'll see some HTML. So there's a wrapper, unordered list outside, and there's a list item that says table of contents. And it's pointing to that TOC HTML that we said we want in the JSON, in the IG JSON. We said here we want that table of content HTML to be created. So once it's created, we want the menu to actually point to it with the heading table of contents so we could see it. And then you could have another list item. This one using the CSS dropdown, and with the CSS for the template, this will turn into a drop-down menu, and we'll see this after the site is built. Within this dropdown, which is labeled other, there are two entries right here. One of them is QA, and one of them is QA minimum, and they point to two HTML files, QA.html and QA minimum.html. These two files are created as part of the build by default, so you don't need to say I want them. They're built by default. And this menu, this drop-down menu, and we could name this QA, and we could name this QA full. Okay, so this is the menu.xml file that has to be in the includes folder. Okay, and you have to have the resources folder. Okay, so that got us through that step. Now we're going to go ahead and run the publisher. I think I can't remember. I think I mentioned in this video that you need to have Java installed, you need to have Jekyll and Ruby installed, and there are a couple other videos for that. So I have those already set up. So I'm going to show you running the tools right now. Okay. Before I do that, let me again orient you to the folders. So FHIR-YouTube is the GitHub repository. Under it, there's videos. Under it, there's examples. Under it, there's the IG demo. Everything we're doing in this series is going to be under this folder. Inside it, there is the IG root, which is where the FHIR IG stuff lives. And it's good to create this as a subfolder in case you need to do other things in your same project. The README right here is what you are seeing, what you were seeing earlier. When you come into the IG root, we'll have the publisher. I downloaded it, happened to put it here. The IG INI has to be at the root of the IG and at the root of the IG specific folder, which is IG root. And it's next to the input folder. And it's and then in the input folder, we'll have the IG JSON, and we'll have the resource and includes folders that we talked about. Okay. So now when you want to run the tool, you need to be at the command line. I showed you this open, but let me close it. In your Windows setup or whatever operating system you have, you might be able to open a command line right at this folder. So I'm going to click at the IG root here, hold Shift down, and right click on the empty spot. And in Windows, you might see an entry open PowerShell window here, or open command prompt here, or something like that. And if you do that, you will get a window sort of similar like this, or a black one if you're using the command prompt, right at the directory that you specified right up here. But if you don't see that shortcut menu option, you could go to your start button, and you're not seeing it completely here, but if you just open your start button and start typing C and D, for example, you'll have an entry called command prompt show up here. And if you click on that, you'll get a black box like this. It will open by default in your home folder. So you'll have to then navigate to wherever you have these files that we're working with. And the way you navigate is to see where you are, you hit dir for directory, and you do that, and you'll get a listing of the directories. And then you could cd and use your tab and backspace. You have to use backspace in Windows, backslash. And you could hit tab to see what you have, and keep doing tab backslash until you get to the right spot. Okay. So right now, sorry, I was not showing this on the screen. So, okay, I was hitting tab backslash to navigate from my home directory all the way to the path of the FHIR IG demo folder. And then if I hit dir for directory and enter, you'll see I have the IG root, which I want to be in. So I'm going to say cd IG and hit enter, hit tab, it will complete for me. And you could, so let's say if you do cd space and hit tab, it will cycle through all your folders, find the right one. Once it's there, you hit enter, and now I'm there. Hit directory, and I am at the publisher jar file and the IG INI. So I'm in the right spot. So whether you're on this one or this one, it's really the same. It doesn't matter. Okay. So I am in the IG root, and if I hit dir, same thing. The output is sort of similar. It looks a little bit cleaner in this PowerShell window than the command prompt one. So I'm going to continue with this one. So we want to run the IG publisher. So it runs with Java. It's a jar file, so we have to give an option jar, and then publisher jar. Remove any of these dot backslash prefixes if you happen to get them when you do the tab autocomplete. And then there's a parameter, another parameter, IG, and it's the ig.ini file. And again, remove these like what I did is if you hit tab complete, it will complete for you, but it will add this prefix. You want to remove that. The tool will fail. You have that. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need to do. You're pointing at the IGINI, and let me switch here. You're pointing at the IGINI, which specifies a template, and it in turn points at the IG.json, and the IG.json has all the information the tooling needs to build. Okay, so let's run this and let's see if things are going to run without errors. As you work through this, it's worth reading through what's happening here. You'll notice kind of a sequence of steps that's happening. I'll let this finish and then we'll walk through the results. There are lots of directories that are being created. The first thing we'll look at is the build site, just so you could see what it looks like when it's minimum. You could see it's generating outputs, it's copying and so forth. And now it's running the Jekyll tool. You can see a Jekyll is running right now. Okay, so this ran successfully. You'll see the last few lines. So I'm back at the prompt right here. Oops, sorry. Okay. I'm back at the command prompt, which means it's done. It says it's done. Okay, it gives you some warnings, errors. It says 2, warnings 0. Don't worry about that. If you see these last few lines, I mean it ran okay. So let's look at what happened here. So we're in the IG root. Okay. You remember we had the input folder and we had the IG INI and we had the publisher. We ran it. Now we have all these other folders created. Okay. There's a template folder where the template is retrieved and extracted. There's a temporary builds folder. And then there is the output folder, and then there is a cache folder. Cache speeds up another future build. The output is where the website is created. So if you enter the output folder, and you'll see it's a folder. Even though the IG is empty, it's a folder that has lots of files. And this is the typical output. It's usually flat, so directories could get huge. So I think I mentioned there is no index.html file right now because we have not written one. The tool doesn't create one by default, but we specified that our table of content is our sort of entry page to the IG. So just come down here and find table of content. And it's right here, table of content.html. So I'm going to drag that file, and I dragged it to my browser, and this is what you see. Very little, there's really nothing in there, but you'll see the site built. So you'll see the menu up here that we talked about, table of content. It's a link to the table of content. The QA menu has a full QA and a minimal QA. Remember, we had that in the menu XML file. There is a kind of a blank entry here. I must have forgotten, left a empty line in there. A list entry. Okay, so the table of content itself starts with table content, and then there's a file called artifact summary. And the file, it's called artifacts.html. That's in the output folder. We'll look at it. There are no artifacts because we had no resources. If you remember, the resources in the implementation guide was an empty array, so we don't have anything to look at. But the QA report is built always, and it's a single HTML file, so it's not using the template. So you have something like this. This is giving you information about the build, any kind of errors that happened, and then for each resource you have, it will have a summary of what's going on with it, and so forth. You don't need to be concerned about this now, but as we build things, you'll see this is useful. Okay, so that was the minimal, the QA.minimum one, and the full one is kind of slightly different. It just had it could be a little bit noisier as you start building things. Okay, so this is the static website. And we got to it from the output folder. Okay. So this worked. With this setup, you have the initial setup and the tooling working. Just briefly, remember I said you have a template folder. If you're curious about this, the template and the temp folder, the tooling takes the template, uses some of the template pages to create copies of additional specific pages, of resource-specific pages. It puts those files in the temp directory. The temp directory ends up being a source directory for the Jekyll tool. So the IG publisher builds a Jekyll source setup under pages right here. So if you go into pages, and if you're familiar with Jekyll, the publisher Jekyll, you'll recognize the data folder, the includes folder. And if you come to the includes folder, you'll see lots of content created here. One of them is the menu XML that we had in the includes folder, and the input that got copied here. But basically, the pages folder inside the temp folder at the IG root is a Jekyll site. And you could run Jekyll within this folder, and it will generate the output for you. So this is the output of Jekyll. Am I showing the right? Yes. The output folder under the IG root, the output folder right here, is made with Jekyll from the source in temp pages, under pages right here. And the template, if you're familiar with Jekyll, then the template will start to make sense to you because it has the idea of layouts for Jekyll, and it has some kind of very generic fragments, which are includes that are used to create all the includes in here. And you see them copied right here. Okay, so I think I'll stop there, but just I wanted to kind of give you some sense that the template supports creating a temp folder, which is the Jekyll site, which creates the output folder. The input cache saves some content that's retrieved online. So you have the schema files if you're working with XML and XSD, but we're using JSON, so it does not retrieve those by default. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. Let's go over the README one more time. Okay, so like I said, the published site is under the output folder. Okay, so I have some links here. If you let me show you some of this stuff because it's useful. So there is a sample IG on GitHub. I'm going to be copying one of these links at a time and showing you on my browser side here. Okay, so let me copy the first link. And if you want to start, with a fuller starting IG, you want to go to the FHIR organization sample IG. The sample IG here is a starter implementation guide that has more scripting support to run things. Same thing, you have the IG.ini, and if you click on it, you'll see it has the IG and the template. Okay, there's some more comments here to tell you what else you could do. There is no IG root folder. This whole repository is the IG root, so there's the input folder. Okay, so if you go to the input folder, you'll see the equivalent of the IG.json that I was showing. In this case, they're doing it in XML, and they're naming it myig.xml. But if you go into this, you'll see it is an implementation guide instance. Okay, and it has an ID, and it has a URL, and it has a version, it has the same information. This file is more complex because they're trying to show you all the various features that you could work with. I was trying to show you the minimum stuff to get the tooling working. And they have more content. So in addition to the resources and the includes folder, they have other files, other folders that have content to show you how that content works. If you go into the resources folder, in my case it was empty, but if you go in here, you'll see a few resources here. And when you build the sample IG project, you build it the same way with the Java jar publisher, and you point at the IGINI here. You'll see the built site has more stuff in it. And let me briefly show you what that one would look like in case you are interested in giving that a try. And it has an index page. It will look like this. If you build that site that I was just showing, you'll get this result. And if you go to the table of content, you'll see there's more content in here. Okay. And if you come to the home, you'll see that. And you'll have the drop-down menus like I was showing. Okay. The artifact index page, which is artifacts.html, lists few artifacts that are included with the starter IG. But I wanted to start from an empty one because I think it's easier to understand and then start including things from there. Okay, so that was one resource in the README. When you come to the FHIR YouTube repository, my YouTube, you'll see these links down here. The FHIR publisher itself has documentation on the HL7 wiki, and this is a link to that. So if you click on that, it will take you to the IG publisher documentation. There is a small section about the INI file format. They used to have a older format, which is JSON based. And most of the documentation on this page is about the older format. So just don't confuse what you see here in this wiki page with the simpler INI configuration. Okay. So you pick one or the other, and I showed the INI version, which is the newer approach. In the same wiki, you'll have a lot of other pages here that are useful. One page above this one, the IG publisher, is the implementation guide parameters. And if you click on that one, you will get to see the parameter. Is it allowed to repeat, and what type it is, and a description of it. We'll gradually learn about some of this, but these are the parameters that you could put in the JSON parameter down here. So this is the IG.json. I put only 2 parameters. These seem to be required by the tools. But on this wiki page that I was showing right here, you have additional parameters that you could specify. They're obviously not really required. And we'll get to learn about some of them later. Okay. This third link is to that parameters page. And there is a, okay, so let's go to this one. There is this implementation guide that is published by the FHIR folks. It is about giving guidance for IG creation. So this is also worth reading at some point, okay? This is meant, this implementation guide is meant just to share information about how to create implementation guides. There aren't any FHIR artifacts. That's not the point. The point is about having some documentation pages. And we'll learn some of this as we go through this playlist. Okay, so I think I should stop here. Kind of went through all this. And the next video will be about picking one resource and creating a profile and working through that and building that and seeing how that works. Okay, so that's it for now. We'll see you next one. Please like and subscribe if you find these videos useful. It will encourage me to keep going, and leave a comment. Let me know what you're interested in next, and if there's anything I could do to improve the content or the quality of these videos. Also, at some point, check out some of these resources listed here. They're still work in progress, and I will have a follow-up video to describe them. Keep in mind that this content is for educational purposes. There are no guarantees of accuracy and completeness, and you should use at your own risk. You might be seeing a few YouTube cards on the screen. They are suggested next videos or related playlists.